I sat in the last row of the company-wide meeting, watching Jackson Merritt pace across the stage like he owned the universe. The CEO's voice boomed through the auditorium as he gestured dramatically at the projection screen behind him. "What you're seeing today is the culmination of months of breakthrough innovation," Jackson announced, his perfect veneers gleaming under the spotlights. "An AI platform that will revolutionize how logistics operates globally." The slide transitioned to a familiar architecture diagram, my architecture diagram, the one I had sketched on a napkin at my mother's birthday dinner 6 months ago when inspiration struck between cake and coffee. I'd refined it over countless nights, built every module from scratch, and tested edge cases no one else had even considered. Now it was being presented as our latest innovation. I didn't flinch when the room erupted in applause. Instead, I silently noted how Jackson emphasized certain phrases: our proprietary algorithm, our unique approach, our team's vision. Not once did he mention my name. Not once did he acknowledge that every line of code, every elegant solution to previously insurmountable problems, had come from my mind. When the Q&A session began, a young engineer raised his hand. "This is incredible work. Which team led the development?" Jackson's smile didn't waver. This was a true collaborative effort across departments. His eyes swept the room but conveniently skipped over my corner. Though, of course, final architecture decisions were made at the executive level. I reached for my phone and typed 3 notes. Delete drafts, extract personal data, don't forget thermos. The thermos was sitting on my desk, half full of the morning's coffee. It was the only personal item I needed to take with me when I walked out of Novatrek Logistics for the last time tonight. No one noticed when I slipped out of the meeting 15 minutes early. They were too busy listening to Jackson detail how his revolutionary system would triple the company's valuation by year's end. Too distracted by promises of bonuses and stock options to notice the architect of their golden ticket heading for the exit. Back at my desk, I navigated to the company's internal repository. My hands moved with practiced precision as I deleted drafts of papers I hadn't yet submitted for patent review. I'd already secured the essential patents under my name months ago. Of course, Jackson didn't know that yet, but he would. I erased my personal settings from the workstation, cleared browser cookies, and removed all traces of my development environment configurations. The office hummed with the usual afternoon energy phones ringing, keyboards clicking, occasional laughter from the break room. No one paid attention to the quiet woman in the corner office performing her digital disappearing act. At precisely 5:47 p.m., I logged out of the system for the final time. I collected my thermos, leaving behind the coffee ring on my desk, the only evidence I had ever occupied this space. No farewell email, no dramatic resignation, just the silent exit of a woman who had already set her plans in motion 6 months earlier. Outside, the evening air carried the first hint of autumn. I walked unhurriedly to the subway station, just another professional heading home after a day's work. But inside my bag was a laptop containing the access codes to Sable Ridge Systems LLC, my shell company, and a private repository hosting a restructured, upgraded version of the AI model Jackson had just claimed as his own. He thought he had stolen my work. In reality, he had only stolen its shadow. The real system, the one I had been perfecting in parallel, was far more powerful. And by this time tomorrow, the first phase of my response would begin. Sometimes revenge isn't about explosive confrontations or public accusations. Sometimes, it's about the quiet execution of a plan so meticulous that your opponent doesn't realize they've lost until they're already in checkmate. I smiled as I swiped my MetroCard. Jackson Merritt was about to learn what happens when you steal from someone who thinks 3 moves ahead. The signs had been there for months, subtle shifts in the company dynamics that I initially dismissed as standard corporate politics. But looking back, I should have recognized the pattern sooner. It started 6 months ago. After I presented the initial concept to the executive team, the room had fallen silent when I finished my demonstration, the good kind of silence that follows when minds are processing something revolutionary. Then came the questions, technical and probing at first. then increasingly strategic as they grasped the implications. Jackson had remained quiet throughout, watching not me but the reactions of the other executives. When he finally spoke, his question wasn't about the technology. "Who else knows about this?" he asked. "Just the people in this room," I answered. I wanted executive input before expanding the team. He nodded, satisfaction briefly crossing his face. "Good. Let's keep this close for now. Lena, you'll report directly to me on this project going forward." That should have been my first warning. The second came 3 weeks later when Jackson began using "we" when discussing my work with investors. "We've developed a novel approach to predictive logistics," he'd say, his hand casually resting on my shoulder during demonstrations. By month 3, the "we" had transformed to "our team" in company-wide emails. By month 4, my name had stopped appearing in meeting minutes altogether. I confronted him once, after a particularly egregious presentation, where he walked potential investors through his architectural decisions. "Jackson, I need to be credited for my work," I said, catching him alone in the corridor. He looked genuinely surprised. "Lena, you're getting credit. Everyone in the company knows you're on the team." "On the team," I repeated, "not leading it, not creating it." His expression shifted to the practiced empathy he used when denying promotion requests. "This is how business works at this level. We present a unified front. The company gets the credit. We all benefit from the success." He checked his watch. "We'll talk more about this later. I promise." We never did. By month 5, I had already incorporated Sable Ridge Systems, using personal funds and a lawyer who had no connection to anyone at Novatrek. I paid for everything with my personal credit card, leaving no company expense trail. I worked nights and weekends at home, refining my model, making it more versatile, more powerful, more mine. I wasn't just improving the system, I was transforming it into something Jackson could never claim. While the Novatrek version focused solely on logistics optimization, my enhanced version became a plug-and-play architecture that could be adapted for retail inventory management, healthcare resource allocation, or transportation routing with minimal reconfiguration. I filed patents under Sable Ridge, carefully worded to protect the core innovations without triggering Novatrek's legal team if they performed routine IP monitoring. I documented everything meticulously. Timestamps on development, witnesses to my independent work, clean room procedures to ensure no Novatrek resources were used. Not that I needed to worry about Jackson checking too carefully. His technical knowledge was superficial at best, curated phrases he'd collected from listening to actual engineers. He understood enough to impress non-technical board members, but not enough to recognize that what I was building at home had already evolved beyond what sat in Novatrek's repositories. The final warning came last week when I overheard him in his office, door slightly ajar. "We're filing the patents this month," he was saying to someone on the phone. "Yes, company owned. Of course, the technical lead." "No, she's just an employee, not a named inventor. Standard employment contract covers all intellectual property." That night, I finalized my exit strategy. I made one call to a contact at Helix Core Solutions, Novatrek's largest competitor, and scheduled a meeting for the day after Jackson's big announcement. Some might call what I did corporate espionage. I call it reclaiming what was rightfully mine from someone who thought I would remain silent while he built his reputation on my intellect. I took one last look at Novatrek's gleaming headquarters as the subway pulled away. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of Jackson Merritt's education in the dangers of underestimating quiet women. Marco Latimer, Helix Core's CTO, didn't try to hide his skepticism when I walked into the conference room. His assistant had arranged the meeting based on my vague promise of technology that would interest him, but I could tell from his posture leaning back, arms crossed, that he expected to be unimpressed. "You have 15 minutes, he said after minimal pleasantries. "I understand you just left Novatrek." "Yesterday," I confirmed, setting up my laptop. "And now you want to sell us something." His tone made it clear how he viewed such transitions. "Not exactly," I connected to the projector. "I want to show you something I built. something that belongs entirely to me, not to Novatrek. His eyebrow rose slightly. Their lawyers might disagree. They can try, I smiled, but they'd be wrong, and I have the documentation to prove it. The screen illuminated with a clean interface, nothing flashy, just elegant functionality. I navigated through a series of visualizations showing real-time supply chain optimizations across a simulated global network. This is Nexus, I said, an adaptive AI framework for operational intelligence. Marco leaned forward slightly. Looks similar to what Novatrek has been hinting at in their investor calls. The difference is, this one works. I pulled up a side panel showing performance metrics. And it's mine. Every patent, every line of code. For the next 12 minutes, I demonstrated capabilities that made Novatrek's version look like a high school programming project. Nexus didn't just predict supply chain disruptions. It automatically reconfigured distribution networks in milliseconds. It didn't just optimize warehouse operations. It learned from historical patterns to pre-position inventory before demand spikes occurred. By minute 14, Marco had abandoned his skeptical posture and was standing beside me, asking increasingly technical questions that I answered with the precision of someone who had built the system from its foundation. How long would implementation take? He finally asked. 3 weeks for core functions, 8 for full deployment across your network. He laughed. That's impossible. Our last system integration took 8 months. That's because you were integrating someone else's system designed for general purposes. I closed the presentation. Nexus was built to be adaptable from the ground up. The modules reconfigure themselves based on the data environment. And you own all the IP personally. Through Sable Ridge Systems, I have a complete paper trail showing independent development. He studied me for a long moment. Why come to us? You could shop this around. Start a bidding war. Because I want it implemented immediately, at scale, by a company with the infrastructure to maximize its potential. I paused. And because I want Novatrek to recognize exactly what they lost when they chose to erase my contributions. Understanding dawned in his eyes. This isn't just business for you. It's both business and personal, I acknowledged. But my personal motivation doesn't diminish the business opportunity. If anything, it ensures you're getting my absolute best work. Marco nodded slowly. What are your terms? Exclusive perpetual license to Helix Core. Sable Ridge maintains ownership of the IP and receives royalties on implementation. I join as a consultant during integration, then exit with no further obligations. And Novatrek will never have access to this architecture again. He extended his hand. We'll need our legal team to review everything, but provisionally, I believe we have an agreement. We shook hands, and in that moment, the first domino in my plan fell exactly as intended. 3 hours later, Novatrek received a cease and desist letter from Sable Ridge Systems, claiming patent infringement on key components of their newly announced AI platform. Attached were copies of my patents, filed months earlier, along with documentation proving my independent development of the technology. The letter didn't come from me. As far as Novatrek knew, I had simply resigned and disappeared. The letter came from a prestigious law firm specializing in intellectual property, representing the mysterious Sable Ridge Systems LLC. By morning, chaos would erupt within Novatrek's walls. By afternoon, their legal team would be in emergency meetings. By evening, Jackson would realize that the ground beneath his feet had turned to quicksand. And I would be sitting in a different conference room, finalizing details with Helix Core's implementation team, watching Novatrek's unraveling from a comfortable distance. Some people demand credit in the moment. I preferred to let my work speak for itself, and now it would speak volumes, just not for the company or the man who had tried to claim it as their own. The internal meltdown at Novatrek began precisely as I had anticipated. My former colleague Sophie texted me the morning after the cease and desist arrived. "What the hell is happening?" her message read. "Legal team running around like headless chickens. Jackson locked in boardroom for hours. Someone leaked that we might be using stolen tech. True." I didn't respond. Sophie was nice enough, but she was also notoriously unable to keep information to herself. Anything I told her would circulate through the company within hours. Better to let rumors ferment naturally. By midday, 3 more former teammates had reached out with similar questions. I maintained my silence, allowing speculation to flourish in the information vacuum. Novatrek's official response came late that afternoon, a carefully worded statement to employees about reviewing certain intellectual property matters and full confidence in our legal position. The kind of corporate non-statement that only amplifies concern rather than alleviating it. Meanwhile, I spent the day at Helix Core, walking their senior engineers through Nexus's architecture. They were quick to grasp its elegance, asking intelligent questions that reminded me why Helix Core had the superior technical reputation despite Novatrek's marketing advantages. "This modular approach to the prediction engine is brilliant," said Elaine, their lead data scientist, as we reviewed the code together. "You've essentially created a system that rewrites its own optimization parameters based on outcome analysis." "That's the core innovation," I confirmed. "Most AI systems require human adjustment when conditions change. Nexus learns not just from the data, but from its own successes and failures." "How did Novatrek not understand what they had here?" another engineer asked. I gave a diplomatic answer about different organizational priorities, but the truth was simpler. Jackson didn't understand the technology well enough to recognize its full potential. He saw only what it could do for logistics, because that was Novatrek's business. He never grasped that I had built a framework that transcended individual applications. After the technical sessions concluded, Marco invited me to dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the city. As we waited for our entrees, he handed me a tablet displaying a financial news site. "Thought you might find this interesting," he said. The headline read, "Novatrek stock drops 8% following IP dispute rumors." The article noted that several major investors had expressed concerns about the company's much-hyped AI platform after sources close to the situation suggested potential patent infringement issues. "Did you plant this story?" I asked. Marco shook his head. "The market is efficient at processing information. Someone at Novatrek talked to someone who talked to someone else. Information flows, especially when it impacts valuations." I nodded. Returning the tablet, a part of me felt momentary guilt for the innocent Novatrek employees whose stock options were now worth less. But I reminded myself that Jackson's deception would have eventually led to a much steeper crash when the technology failed to deliver on his exaggerated promises. "Has Novatrek reached out to Helix Core?" I asked. "Not directly, but 3 of their senior engineers have suddenly updated their LinkedIn profiles and sent resumes to our HR department." Marco smiled thinly. "Rats sensing a listing ship. Any worth hiring? 2 are solid. 1 we're interviewing next week." He studied me. "You're taking this all rather calmly. No satisfaction in watching them struggle." "I didn't do this for satisfaction," I replied. "I did it because it was the correct response to their actions. Most people in your position would be gloating. Most people in my position would have shouted accusations in the middle of that company meeting, then walked out dramatically." I sipped my water. That approach might feel good momentarily, but it rarely achieves optimal outcomes. Marco laughed. "You really do think like an algorithm, don't you?" "I prefer to say, I think systematically," I corrected. "Emotional responses have their place, but they make poor strategic guides." Our food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As we ate, I received another text, this one from an unknown number. "This is Jackson. We need to talk. What's your price?" I showed the message to Marco, who raised his eyebrows. "Are you going to respond?" he asked. "No need. My price was acknowledgement and respect 6 months ago. Now my price is watching him explain to his board why their revolutionary technology belongs to someone else." Marco raised his glass. "To the correct response, then." We clinked glasses, and I allowed myself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. Tomorrow would begin Phase 2 public demonstration. While Novatrek scrambled to assess the damage and reconstruct their AI platform without infringing on my patents, I stepped onto the stage at Helix Core's quarterly technology showcase. The audience consisted of industry analysts, potential clients, and tech journalists, precisely the influential voices Novatrek had been courting for months. I wore a simple charcoal dress, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. Nothing about my appearance suggested I was there to make a statement, but the content of my presentation would speak volumes. "Good morning," I began. "I'm Lena Whitmore, consulting with Helix Core on their new operational intelligence system. Today I'll demonstrate capabilities that represent a fundamental shift in how AI can optimize complex business operations." For the next 30 minutes, I walked through Nexus's capabilities without once mentioning Novatrek or claiming personal credit for the invention. I simply showed what the system could do, reducing latency by 42% compared to industry standards, automatically orchestrating resources in real time rather than batch processing, adapting to new data patterns without human intervention. The audience, initially polite but reserved, grew increasingly engaged as the demonstration progressed. By the time I opened the floor for questions, hands shot up across the room. "How soon will this be available to Helix Core clients?" asked an analyst from a major investment firm. "Initial implementations begin next month," I replied. "Full functionality will roll out in phases over the following quarter." "These performance metrics are remarkable," said another. "Has this been validated in real-world conditions or just simulations?" "Both. We've run parallel testing against existing systems using historical data from actual operations, then verified with live data streams. The results are consistent across all testing environments." More questions followed, technical, business-oriented, skeptical in the way that indicated serious interest rather than dismissal. I answered each precisely, neither overselling nor understating Nexus's capabilities. As the session concluded, Marco joined me on stage to discuss Helix Core's implementation roadmap. The subtext was clear to everyone in the room. Helix Core now possessed technology that dramatically outperformed anything their competitors, including Novatrek, had demonstrated. Afterward, in the green room, Marco handed me a glass of champagne. "Perfectly executed," he said. "3 analysts have already requested private demonstrations, and the initial feedback is better than we hoped." I checked my phone. The industry publication TechWire had already posted an article titled "Helix Core Unveils Game-Changing AI System, Leapfrogs Competitors." The piece specifically noted that the system showed maturity and refinement that suggests years of development, raising questions about recent announcements from rival firms. Another text from Jackson appeared. "Whatever they're paying you, we'll double it. This isn't over." I deleted it without responding. "What happens now?" Marco asked, noticing my expression. "Now we wait," I said. "News will spread, questions will be asked, comparisons will be made. And Novatrek. We'll discover that building something from scratch is much harder than taking credit for someone else's work." Marco raised his glass. "To appropriate consequences." We clinked glasses again, and I felt neither joy nor vindication, just the quiet satisfaction of watching a carefully constructed plan unfold exactly as designed. Later that afternoon, I sat in a coffee shop several blocks from the conference center, reviewing the coverage of the presentation. Most articles focused on the technical aspects, but a few more investigative pieces had begun drawing connections. Industry insiders note similarities between Helix Core's new system and capabilities previously hinted at by Novatrek, wrote one technology blogger. Sources suggest a key developer may have transitioned between companies, bringing legitimate IP with them. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was Novatrek's chief legal officer, someone I'd rarely interacted with during my time there. "Ms. Whitmore, we have reason to believe you may have violated confidentiality agreements and intellectual property provisions in your employment contract. We request an immediate meeting to discuss these serious concerns before pursuing further action." I forwarded the email to my attorney without comment. Within 20 minutes, he had responded to Novatrek with a concise message reminding them that all my work on Nexus had been independently developed, properly documented, and appropriately patented, along with a warning that any public accusations of impropriety would result in immediate defamation counteractions. By evening, social media had caught wind of the situation. The hashtag #AI Battle Royale was trending in tech circles, with users speculating about the behind-the-scenes drama. Several former Novatrek employees had begun posting cryptic messages suggesting internal turmoil at the company. One post particularly caught my attention, from a senior developer who had worked alongside me. Fascinating to watch companies claim breakthrough innovation when the real innovators are erased from the story. Some leaders take credit, others give it. Choose who you work for carefully. He didn't mention me by name, but he didn't need to. The message was clear enough for those who knew the situation. I closed my laptop and watched pedestrians pass by the cafe window. Phase 2 had accelerated faster than anticipated. The industry was now paying attention, asking questions, connecting dots. The narrative was shifting from Novatrek's triumphant innovation to suspicious circumstances and potential deception. Tomorrow would bring financial analyst assessments, investor inquiries, and internal pressure at Novatrek for explanations. Jackson would be facing questions he couldn't answer about technology he didn't understand. I ordered another coffee and opened my development environment. While the chaos unfolded at my former company, I would continue refining Nexus, because ultimately, this wasn't just about retribution, it was about creating something exceptional that would have never reached its full potential under Jackson's limited vision. The best revenge wasn't just watching him fall, it was soaring beyond what he could have imagined. The financial impact hit Novatrek with stunning swiftness. By market open the following day, their stock had dropped another 12%, triggering a temporary trading halt. When trading resumed, the decline continued more gradually but persistently. Investment forums buzzed with analysis and speculation, most centered around variations of the same theme: if Novatrek's breakthrough technology was compromised by IP issues. What exactly were investors buying into? Jackson finally broke his unusual silence with a company-wide email that was promptly leaked to the technology press. Recent market volatility reflects misunderstandings regarding our proprietary technology. We maintain full confidence in our legal position and the integrity of our innovation. This temporary distraction will not deter us from our mission or growth trajectory. The email's corporate platitudes did little to reassure anyone. If anything, its vagueness intensified concerns. By mid-morning, Novatrek's PR team had arranged a hastily organized press call. I didn't need to listen in. Sophie provided a real-time commentary via text messages. Jackson looks terrible. Hasn't slept. Keeps saying our tech is fundamentally different from Helix cores but won't explain how. Legal guy jumped in when someone asked about patents. Super awkward. Now claiming they'll have even more impressive updates in coming weeks. Sure, Jan. OMG reporter just asked directly if you took IP with you to Helix Core. Jackson practically swallowed his tongue. I put my phone away and focused on my meeting with Helix Core's implementation team. We were mapping out integration points with their existing systems' productive work that would actually deliver value, unlike the damage control theater occurring at Novatrek. After the meeting, Marco invited me to his office. "You've seen the market reaction?" he asked, gesturing to a screen displaying financial data. "I've been made aware," I replied. "Their market cap has decreased by nearly 30% in 2 days." He studied me. "That represents hundreds of millions in lost value, most of which was artificially inflated by false promises," I pointed out. "The correction was inevitable, with or without my actions." Marco nodded slowly. "Our board is impressed with both the technology and the strategic advantages it's creating. They've authorized me to offer you a more permanent position. Chief Architecture Officer, reporting directly to me." I thanked him for the offer but declined. "I'm not looking for another corporate position right now. The consulting arrangement works better for my plans." He didn't press the issue. "Fair enough. Though the offer remains open," he handed me an envelope. "This, however, is non-negotiable. Your first royalty payment, as agreed." The check inside represented more money than I'd earned in the past 2 years at Novatrek. Not life-changing wealth, but enough to provide freedom and options. "Thank you," I said, tucking it away. "No, thank you. This partnership is proving even more valuable than anticipated." Marco's expression turned curious. "I have to ask, though, what's your endgame here? You've made your point. You've secured your IP. You're being compensated appropriately now. Is that enough?" I considered the question carefully. "It's not about punishment or compensation," I finally said. "It's about correction. Jackson built his reputation claiming innovations he didn't create. The market is now reassessing his value based on more accurate information. That's all I wanted: reality realignment." Marco laughed. "You really do think in systems." He shook his head. "Most people would want to see him fired, publicly humiliated, personally destroyed." "That would be inefficient," I replied. "Jackson's career trajectory will naturally adjust based on his demonstrated capabilities. The market is already making that correction without my interference." As I left Helix Core's headquarters, my phone buzzed with another email notification. This one wasn't from Novatrek's legal department, but from Jackson himself, sent to my personal email address. "Lena, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. We need to resolve this situation before it causes irreparable damage to both parties. I acknowledge that your contributions to the project were significant and perhaps inadequately recognized. I'm prepared to discuss appropriate remedies, including financial compensation and public attribution. Can we please talk directly?" This email chain can serve as the beginning of settlement discussions and is without prejudice to either party's legal position. For the first time, he was acknowledging my role not because he valued my work, but because he was desperate to stop the bleeding. Classic Jackson tactical concessions only when backed into a corner. I deleted the email without responding and continued walking. Some messages deserve no reply. Some people earn your silence. By afternoon, industry analysts had begun publishing detailed comparisons between Helix Core's demonstrated capabilities and Novatrek's promised features. The consensus was emerging that Helix Core had not only matched Novatrek's publicized technology, but had substantially exceeded it in several key dimensions. One analyst's assessment was particularly pointed. While Novatrek continues to reference future capabilities, Helix Core is demonstrating working technology today. The performance metrics are not projections, but verified results. This represents a significant shift in the competitive landscape, with Helix Core now positioned as the clear technology leader in the space. Another publication ran a feature titled, "The Elizabeth Holmes of AI." The piece stopped short of directly accusing Jackson of fraud, but raised uncomfortable questions about the gap between Novatrek's marketing claims and their demonstrable technology. By market close, Novatrek's stock had stabilized somewhat, but remained far below its previous highs. More significantly, trading volume had increased dramatically, suggesting institutional investors were reevaluating their positions. That evening, I received a call from my attorney. "Novatrek has proposed settlement terms," he informed me. "They're offering to license the technology from Sable Ridge at what they're calling market rates, plus a one-time payment for what they term consultation services." "And in exchange?" I asked. "A mutual non-disparagement agreement, withdrawal of our cease and desist, and your assistance in helping them implement the technology properly." I laughed. "So they want me to not only drop the legitimate IP claim, but also help them build what they falsely claimed they already had?" "Essentially, yes." "Decline the offer," I said. "Inform them that Sable Ridge has an exclusive licensing agreement with Helix Core that precludes any such arrangement." After hanging up, I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. My phone continued to buzz with messages from former colleagues, industry contacts, even recruiters who had somehow caught wind of the situation. I ignored them all. What most of them failed to understand was that this had never been about negotiating a better position or extracting a larger payout. It was about establishing the truth not through accusations or litigation, but through demonstrated reality. Jackson had built his career claiming credit for others' innovations. Now the market was reassessing his value based on his actual contributions. The system was correcting itself without my needing to throw a single public punch. My phone buzzed again, another email from Jackson. The subject line read simply, "Please." I deleted it unread and turned my attention to the night sky. Some confrontations are best won by refusing to engage in them at all. 3 weeks later, the technology landscape had shifted dramatically. Helix Core had publicly launched their Nexus-powered platform to widespread industry acclaim. Early clients reported performance improvements exceeding even the impressive metrics from the initial demonstrations. Novatrek, meanwhile, had entered what financial analysts euphemistically called a strategic reassessment period. Their much-hyped AI platform had been quietly delayed for enhancement opportunities. According to their press releases, industry insiders recognized this for what it was, a desperate scramble to develop an alternative that wouldn't infringe on my patents. I maintained my consulting role with Helix Core, helping their team integrate Nexus across their client implementations while continuing to refine the core architecture. The work was satisfying purely technical challenges without political machinations or credit stealing. Marco kept me updated on industry gossip, including the latest from Novatrek. Their board called an emergency meeting yesterday. He told me during one of our weekly review sessions. Apparently, 3 major investors are threatening to pull out if there isn't a leadership change. I nodded but offered no comment. Novatrek's internal dynamics were no longer my concern. You're not even a little curious about what happens to Jackson, Marco pressed. His future will be determined by his demonstrated capabilities, I replied. The market is efficient that way. Marco shook his head with a slight smile. You're either the most zen person I've ever met, or the most calculating. Those aren't mutually exclusive, I pointed out. Later that day, the news broke. Novatrek had announced a leadership transition. Jackson was stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. To pursue other opportunities, the interim CEO would be the company's long-serving COO, a woman named Diana Chen, who had a reputation for operational excellence and rigorous integrity. My phone lit up with messages from former colleagues, all variations on the theme of, "Did you hear? And you won." I didn't respond to any of them. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about systems finding equilibrium. That evening, I received a LinkedIn connection request from Diana Chen, followed by a direct message. I believe we should talk about the future of both our companies in this space. No lawyers, no PR, just straightforward discussion between principals. Are you open to that? Unlike Jackson's desperate outreach, this message warranted consideration. Diana had always been the most competent executive at Novatrek, often cleaning up messes created by others' overreach. After some thought, I accepted the connection and agreed to meet. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a private room at a downtown restaurant known for its discretion. Diana arrived precisely on time, dressed in the same practical business attire she'd always favored, without the flashy accessories Jackson had considered necessary signifiers of executive status. After brief pleasantries, she got straight to the point. I'll be direct. Lena, Novatrek is in a difficult position, largely of our own making. I'm not here to dispute your ownership of the IP or to negotiate another attempted license. What are you here for, then? I asked. To understand if there's any path forward that doesn't end with Novatrek becoming irrelevant or bankrupt, she met my gaze steadily, and to apologize personally for how the company treated you and your innovations. The apology surprised me not because Diana wasn't capable of it, but because corporate executives rarely admitted mistakes so plainly. I appreciate that, I said, but I'm not sure what path you're envisioning. Sable Ridge's exclusive agreement with Helix Core prevents licensing the technology to Novatrek. I understand that, Diana nodded. I'm thinking more creatively. Novatrek has strengths that complement Helix Core's, particularly our global implementation team and client relationships in sectors where Helix Core has limited presence. I saw where she was heading. You're suggesting some form of strategic partnership between Novatrek and Helix Core. With appropriate protections for your IP and proper attribution of innovation, she confirmed. A collaboration rather than competition model. The proposal was unexpected but not without merit. While Helix Core had superior technology now, Novatrex still possessed valuable assets in their global presence and established client base. This would require Helix Core's agreement, I noted, and substantial changes in how Novatrex operates. Both are already in progress, Diana revealed. I've had preliminary discussions with Helix Core's CEO, contingent on this conversation. As for Novatrex operations, she smiled grimly. Consider the current situation a catalyst for overdue reforms. The board has given me broad authority to restructure as needed, including addressing the culture that allowed Jackson to claim others' work. Especially that. Diana's expression hardened. What happened to you wasn't an isolated incident, just the most consequential one. There's a pattern that needs correction throughout the organization. We talked for another hour, outlining potential structures for a collaboration that would benefit both companies while ensuring proper recognition for the innovations behind it all. By the end, I had a cautious appreciation for Diana's practical approach and genuine commitment to fixing what had been broken. I'll discuss this with Marco, I promised as our meeting concluded, but I make no guarantees. That's all I ask, Diana said, extending her hand. A fair consideration based on current realities, not past grievances. We shook hands, and I left with much to think about. The path Diana proposed wasn't one I had anticipated in my strategic planning, but it potentially offered better outcomes for everyone involved, including the many innocent Novatrex employees whose livelihoods had been jeopardized by Jackson's actions. Later that week, I arranged a meeting with Marco and Helix Core's CEO to discuss Diana's proposal. Their initial skepticism gradually shifted to cautious interest as I outlined the potential benefits of a limited partnership with the new Novatrex leadership. It's an elegant solution, Marco acknowledged. Helix Core gains immediate access to new markets. Novatrex stabilizes its position without the expense of developing competing technology, and both companies benefit from complementary strengths. And your position, Helix Core's CEO asked me directly. I believe it's viable, with proper controls and explicit acknowledgement of innovation sources, I replied. Diana Chen operates with integrity. The company under her leadership won't repeat past mistakes. We spent the next several weeks negotiating framework agreements, establishing intellectual property protocols, and designing collaborative implementation processes. Throughout it all, I maintained my role as consultant rather than employee, preserving my independence while ensuring the technology achieved its full potential. 6 months after Jackson's fateful presentation, the one where he claimed my work as his own, I sat in another company-wide meeting. This time, it was a joint session between Helix Core and Novatrex teams, announcing their strategic partnership centered around the groundbreaking Nexus platform, originally conceived and developed by Lena Whitmore. Diana Chen and Helix Core's CEO stood side by side on stage, describing how the collaboration would transform both companies' market positions. On the screen behind them, my name appeared prominently in the architecture diagrams and patent listings. As applause filled the room, I remained in my customary position in the back row, observing rather than seeking attention. This wasn't about public recognition or vindication. It was about systems functioning as they should, innovation properly attributed, value appropriately distributed, truth eventually prevailing. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Jackson Merritt had taken a position as innovation advisor at a small startup, several tiers below his previous status. The market had indeed corrected his value based on demonstrated capabilities. I put my phone away and returned my attention to the presentation. The past was settled. The future, with its complex systems waiting to be optimized and its new problems seeking elegant solutions, was infinitely more interesting. Sometimes the most effective response to having your contributions erased isn't shouting louder or fighting for attention. Sometimes it's quietly building something so undeniable that the truth eventually writes itself across every screen, every quarterly report, every stock chart. I had never needed to tell my story publicly. I simply created a system where the truth became the only sustainable narrative. And in the end, that was more satisfying than any dramatic confrontation could ever be.